Welcome to New Progressive Voice. As you guys know, I'm Josh, and I got a guest here today, Dave, from the Progressive Resistance
Resistance Media,
PRM.
PRM.
Yeah, awesome. I started watching Dave about a couple weeks ago, and he's got some really good commentary on his channel. So if you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend you check it out and consider subscribing. So let's get right into it. Why do you identify yourself as a progressive?
Well, I guess like a lot of us, it started back in 2016 or
Yeah.
2015 on the campaign with Bernie Sanders. That's where it started with me. It sort of Bernie Sanders sort of solidified my place with progressives, I would say. I guess I've been like floating all over the place, all over the political spectrum. And then, Bernie Sanders came along, and then something just connected like never before.
Felt the burn.
I felt the burn. I'm still, it's perma burn. Like it's just
Burn. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, man. It's just, Bernie Sanders is the catalyst to got me into progressivism.
Totally get that. I think it's kind of like the unspoken language. We all get it. So what caused you, or what made you or motivated you to consider opening up a YouTube channel?
Wow. Let's see. I've been a huge YouTube fan for the longest time. Like I've been watching the Young Turks since 2005. Kyle Kalinske, when he first started on Secular Talk, I think it was 2008. David Pakman for a while now. So I've always been a fan. I've always been a fan of progressive YouTubers, and I think it never even crossed my mind to start it until I think Trump. I think Trump just really got
there you go.
Got me. Like I just got to be involved. I got to be involved against this guy at max capacity. Like that's just how I feel.
Right. He's like the catalyst, isn't he?
Totally.
So let's talk a little bit about the candidate. So what I'm interested in is seeing your perspective on who you might think, in your mind, is really a progressive, who you might consider, or who you might think is borderline progressive. Like who might be the top 5 picks in your mind?
Okay, top 5, I would say, well, let's start at 5. 5 would be any centrist. Pretty much every centrist except Buttigieg, he would be my number 4. Okay. So like if we start at the bottom 5, okay, any centrist, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, like these are candidates I don't care for, but they're better than Trump, basically. Okay, number 4, it would be Buttigieg. I think he's a cut above the regular centrists that I just named. I think he has more promise. I think he has more to offer, even though he's very thin on policy. He's very thin on.
Yeah, he tends to think philosophically rather than specifically policy.
Exactly, and we got a lot of that with Obama, and and Clinton too. Like it didn't cut it. It wasn't enough, but like Pete Buttigieg is a little bit better than like those other ones I mentioned, in my opinion. Moving up to number 3 would be Andrew Yang. What do you think about Andrew Yang?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I saw his interview this morning with Ben Shapiro, and he had said that he would be open to a public option. Now, that's the first time I've heard him say something along those lines. So that was a little concerning. But in general, I still think his ideas, for the most part, are pretty progressive. The different things like, obviously, UBI, depending on how you implement it, can be thought of as a progressive policy. Some of the other things that he has in mind, such as making sure that we do at least have a healthcare system in place, that everybody gets healthcare. Again, depending on how you implement it, can be or can't be progressive.
Andrew Yang, number 2, Tulsi Gabbard. She was my former number 3, but she bumped up because what you just said there. Andrew Yang came out for a public option, and I was under the impression that he was Medicare for all or bust. But like you said, he came out for the public option. That had me, and I bumped him back down to 3. So Tulsi is my number 2, mainly because she is Medicare for all, or bust. So she's not, taking the centrist position of a public option. She's taking the furthest left position in Medicare for all, for everybody.
Right. Right.
So that bumped her up, and Andrew went down. And obviously, number one is Bernie Sanders. He is the mountaintop. He's just, for the obvious reasons, like I said, catalyst for my progressivism is Bernie Sanders. It's Bernie all the way.
So what it is about Elizabeth Warren that you wouldn't consider to be among the top four?
Wow, yeah, she got bumped down because I think she was four at one time. I actually, if I had to wedge her in there, she would be tied at number 4 with Buttigieg. I just think she caters to the center. It's hard to trust her. I don't know. It's just hard to trust her to be progressive.
So let's say the Democrats do give Bernie Sanders and the progressives a fair row at this, and it turns out that someone like Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, Biden get the nomination. What are your thoughts about that? Now, would you say that we should still put our weight behind that as progressives, or you have something else in mind?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I've been putting this question off because it's primary season. It's all blood and guts right now. It's just going to war for who we want. So I really haven't thought about that too much, but I could.
Kind of jumping ahead, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I'm really just putting my time and effort into the primary season, but that's still a valid question. Back in 2016, I'll admit, and I don't like to admit, but I voted for Hillary Clinton. And, it was the move because I'm just so anti-Trump. Like I'm through and through. I never considered voting for Donald Trump once, like never even considered it. Like it's just, I knew to stay away from that. And Hillary was like, I mean, I can't even rationalize it, but I had to pick that over that. It was just such a horrible decision. My God. But if it comes down to a Beto, Biden, Harris, will I do that again? I guess is the question. And right now, I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if I would, but I know we have to be against Trump. So there's a chance I would. I'm just going to be honest.
Okay.
Because I voted third party most of my life. I know the third party vote doesn't get anywhere in a rigged two-party system. Not because
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the only reason, because I understand the integrity vote. I understand if you want to vote for the Green Party or an independent or libertarian, but it's not going to win in a rigged system. So I have to consider voting. That's what I did in 2016. I had to vote for the person who was going to beat Donald Trump. So if that's Beto O'Rourke, if that's Joe Biden, I have to seriously consider that because of that.
Right. So one of the things that unfortunately can also stem from that is if you end up voting for a Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris, you're putting the problem off further down the road, and then you end up one of those that game where you whack the animal and then another one pops up.
Whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole, yeah. So this is kind of my thinking is like if we do get behind a centrist, then you stand the chance of just prolonging this Trump effect. Another candidate comes up. But anyway, discussion for another time, I suppose. But let's get back to the present primary season. Now, you had talked about your top 4, and I wanted to go in a little more detail about what in your mind might be some of the strengths and weaknesses that you see if one of those 4 get nominated in facing someone like Donald Trump. Start with Pete Buttigieg. What are some of your concerns about him?
He's definitely, Pete Buttigieg is too thin on policy, and in the views he has expressed hit me as of a centrist nature.
Right.
But like I said, most of them are just so thin. Like I can't. There's nothing I can bite into.
Okay. That brings me. Let's go into more detail, because one of the ways that he's approaching Medicare for all, his thought is, let's first open up the public option. Let's get an all-payer system so we can bring the cost of medicine down. And then once we've done that, more people will be encouraged toward Medicare for all because they bought into it, and they'll see just by the fact that it's a better system compared to private insurance. They want to continue to expand it, and eventually we will get to Medicare for all. That's one approach. The other approach is we just go head first, the Bernie Sanders, the Tulsi Gabbard approach.
My thoughts on that are 45,000 Americans die every year because they don't have health care. And by going the public option route, you're basically doing a half measure. You're basically saying, okay, let's get that number down. Let's not eliminate the number. Let's get the number down. Let's say to 20,000, 25,000. And to negotiate that in the lives of, say, 20,000 Americans, it strikes me as psychopathic in that context. When you could be going the whole way.
Okay, that's a good point. But his point is, if you do implement Medicare for all right out the gate, there's a couple of things that might come from that that are negative. Okay. One is you may have a tremendous pushback from the Republican Party. Second is that what if it is implemented, it is not quite as nice as people imagine. There's all kinds of problems that come from it, whether it be the fiscal issues or monetary issues behind such a massive program, or other issues pop up that are more specific or anecdotal, and then that ends up being a huge political device for the right wing.
Right. Yeah. It definitely has to be well thought out and rolled out at a pace that's sustainable and calculated. And I'm sure Bernie has that all laid out in his rollout. But back to the Republicans, like right now, 52% of Republicans are polling in favor of Medicare for all.
That's true.
70% of Americans in general, over 80% in the Democratic Party. So, if we definitely want it as Americans, the majority of Americans want it. So we're willing, if we want it, we're willing to deal with the problems it contains. And as Americans, we'll take that on as they come, as we always do with our problems. So I kind of see it as, we really want this. The polls say we want it, and we're just going to deal with it as it happens,
So do you have the mindset of a Medicare for all bust, or are you open to a Pete Buttigieg or a Andrew Yang?
I am Medicare for all or bust, through and through, 100%. And I'm fighting for that this primary season by having Bernie number one, Tulsi number two.
Okay.
That's my first. And then, obviously if they're not in it, we got to go to the option. We'll just have to. I don't know how else we'll do it,
Okay, another Buttigieg policy that I noted from him is doing away with electoral college and opting for the popular vote. That would be Buttigieg and Andrew Yang. What do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm definitely on board with the popular vote. As much as my conservative friends hate that, and how much they rail against that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I just see the minority, the electoral college ensuring minority rule over the will of the majority. And I have a big problem with that. And I'd love to see the electoral college go away. I believe it's antiquated, and we just.
How about addressing the concerns regarding smaller states and them not having a voice? How do we address that if we go with the popular vote?
Yeah,
or is it something that is overblown and doesn't really exist?
I think that is definitely one of the most popular cases that people make. What about the small states? What about the Mississippis and the Kansases? And
I had this idea of maybe doing something in the middle, which would be, rather than having the electoral vote be at the state level, it would be at a district level or division level. And then each of those divisions count for, say, one electoral college vote, something along those lines that's based upon population. And so let's say that you have Wyoming that's made up of, 700,000 people. You divide it up into 3 segments, and they each get 1 popular vote. And then on top of that, they get 2 additional electoral votes for each of their senators. So something along those lines.
Okay.
But just a thought. I'm going to think about making a video on it, but that's kind of an idea I have. So now, in terms of Pete Buttigieg, you had said that one of your concerns was that he is he comes across a bit of a centrist, and he's sort of general, more philosophical than he is issue based. Well,
Sure.
what are some of the strengths that you see in him? Why do you include him in the sort of semi-progressive camp?
Hmm. Semi-progressive. Let's see. Well, I want to like addressing some of his strengths that may not be progressive. The strengths that he has is youth. He's 37 years old. He's gay. He's married and gay. Um, and he's a veteran too. And when I think of identity politics, when I think of centrists,
Mm,
they love diversity more. I think a lot of us on the left in general, whether we're progressive, liberal, far left, we like diversity, but centrists definitely like diversity and they gravitate to that. And he
okay.
has that in spades. He's nothing like the old, white men of centrist Democrats. But he leans progressive. Like he is a progressive lean. Like he's a centrist who leans progressive.
Hmm.
And that's how they roll. Incrementalism. I just
Hmm.
so that's
Okay.
there. He's fine. He's perfect for centrist.
Okay. Uh, and why would you not consider some of these other candidates like Christine Gillibrand, who is for Medicare for all, or Julian Castro, who's also for Medicare for all, whereas we know Yang and Buttigieg are not?
Are those candidates you just mentioned for all
Yes,
or
they are.
bust?
No, they are. Well, they don't phrase it in the way we're phrasing it, but they have come out for Medicare for all.
Okay, yeah, and that's uh, I don't find them as trustworthy people. I don't think Kristen Gillibrand's trustworthy. She doesn't come off as trustworthy. She comes off as very polished and very
Hmm.
calculated, much
Okay,
like Cory Booker, polished, calculated. I just don't trust that style of politician.
got it. I think
But
you hit the nail on the head there
yeah,
on that
right.
one. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so essentially his package in terms of aesthetics is what will possibly draw in votes, is what you're saying in terms of Pete Buttigieg, one of his strengths.
Totally.
Okay. Now let's move to Andrew Yang. What's your thoughts on this UBI? I mean, are you for it? Are you against it?
Oh, 100% pro UBI.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that's why I'm pro Yang. I'm overall pro Yang, just because he's the only person talking about it, and he's the only
Okay.
person who's made it a number one policy
Hmm.
in their campaign. No one's doing that, so he stands out there.
Your thoughts on the VAT?
Yeah. So what I know about the VAT tax is we're the only major Western country that doesn't do it.
Hmm.
And he was proposing that we do half of the rate that Europe does at 10%.
Right.
So I'm totally for it, like taxing every Google search, every Facebook search, or I don't, whatever it is, like wherever,
And
to
that's
get the money.
knowing that it's on top of your state tax. That's okay for you.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you are in a state, yeah, okay. And then some research has shown that it might hurt poor more than it would any other group of people, um, as they will be more likely to, a 10% tax will more likely to hurt their pocketbook than it would, say, someone that's making $100,000 a year.
That sounds like it could.
But then
That's
again,
something.
they get $1,000 a month.
But that's it. See, that's it. See, it's coming back to it. So it's like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
supposed to even out. Like,
Hmm.
but like he says, like people are saying, what's it going to cost? Upwards of $3 trillion.
Hmm.
But he said after
Right.
it, it's going to funnel back to companies, and it's also going to. It actually will end up costing 1.8 million trillion.
Right.
Didn't he
Right.
say something like that?
Yeah.
So the three every time you hear 3 trillion, that's incorrect.
Hmm.
You have to factor in where that money goes and where it's processed, and then it'll be 1.8 trillion in the end, which isn't
Right.
crap.
Hmm. And that definitely opens up a lot of possibilities, I think, for people on a very personal level. Not just
Oh,
that for
sure.
potential for entrepreneurs, but I was even considering, I have a friend that is in an abusive relationship, and she
Okay.
is It's very difficult for her. She works a part-time job. She's trying to go to school to get herself out of the situation. She's not financially viable in her own personal life, so she's kind of stuck.
So you're talking about there was people perpetuating conspiracy theories about him? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
that he's really out. Ultimately, he's like a Trojan horse for the right wing, and he's coming in and he's going to get elected, and then he's going to take away all the social systems, privatize everything.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, like part of his plan is with UBI is somewhat of a replacement plan. That's not really a conspiracy. It's kind of like, like he said, there's 126, welfare programs in America,
Mhm.
and UBI is going to reduce a lot of those in his, with the way he wants to structure it. So there is some truth there, but I mean, as far as,
But
and actually, that's where a lot of, yeah, go ahead.
he does have some objections that go beyond just not being Medicare for all bus. He's against the federal jobs program.
Okay, yeah.
He's not for minimum wage. So there's a
Right.
few red lights there, yellow lights at least.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Jimmy Dore definitely called out Andrew Yang on that, like on air. That was pretty good. Yeah, he's not for, and I'm for Fight for 15 and UBI.
Right.
And Mike Figueredo, I don't know if you listened to or watched the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo.
hmm
He was talking about how Andrew Yang is a deal breaker because his Andrew Yang's version of UBI is going to hollow out those welfare programs.
Right. Exactly.
And he said the only way I'll support Yang is if he keeps he leaves those programs alone and implements UBI. So some
My
progressives are.
understanding is he's providing it as an opt-in. UBI is an opt-in.
That's
So
right. Yeah,
people would,
that's a good point.
yeah. I think my biggest concern is more, the Medicare for all, that he's not
Yep.
for a federal jobs program. I'm not 100% convinced that federal jobs program is the answer, but I at least
Right.
like to have it on the table for discussion, and it seems like he's just completely adverse to that idea. He feels like he
Yeah.
can turn to a bureaucratic nightmare. So, we've
Yeah.
had public works programs before in the United States, and they went perfectly fine. I mean, our highway system was built around public works programs. It wasn't a bureaucratic nightmare at all. So I'm not sure where people are getting that from. I mean, I can understand the concern, but I think it's overblown.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Anyway, so do you feel like the UBI replaces the minimum wage? What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's like in a way it is a pay raise. You're going to get
Right.
additional dollars an hour, $1,000 a month additional you didn't previously have.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way, it does act like a pay raise of sorts. If
And
you're
my
making
understanding, he's tying it to inflation as well. Like at least he's open to discussing that, like tying it into inflation. And so that then you're always going to get a pay raise no matter what, you know.
okay. Right. Yeah. I forgot the question already.
Well, there's not really a question, it's just food for thought because I do think these are going to be, discussions that are going to come up in the course of once the debates start. Like he's going to bring up he's against the minimum wage, and then you're going to have other Democrats are going to counter him, be it Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard. And I do think this is, you know, this is sort of like the reason why I'm concerned about is it going to lead to divisions within the progressive um, among the progressives, things like this. Something, like
Okay.
what I find oftentimes is one of the good things about Republicans is they're loyalists, and they can
Yep.
disagree on different things, even if the concept or idea or policy is somewhat big to them, but they got three or four that they're just totally willing to rally behind no matter what, They're like a wall that's like,
Right.
excuse the pun.
Well, we
But
have to have some of those, right? We have to have those issues too, right?
yes, absolutely. And I'm concerned that we don't. Like it often concerns me that progressives are so, what's the word? Just nitpicky about like it has to be this way or I'm out,
Or
It's got to be
adversarial.
UBI or I'm out, or it's got to be Medicare for all,
Yeah.
or I'm out of here. And then
Not
next thing you
compromise.
know,
Yeah.
Trump is elected again, you know.
I think, you have some valid points, and I'm guilty of partaking in that, where I'm just like attacking centrists. Actually, I'm trying. First of all, my intent is to call them out, but it always turns into attacks because
Mm.
it's just, I don't know why it always does.
Well, I mean,
But
not necessarily about centrists, as like even let's say that Tulsi Gabbard gets the nomination. Will the Andrew Yang people get behind her? Will the Bernie Sanders people get behind her? Or let's say, better yet, Andrew Yang gets elected and he says, "No, I'm not for Medicare for all. I'm not. I'm not for it." What do you think is going to happen? Do you think a lot of progressives are going to say, "Well, then, I'm done. I'm done with you"?
I could see a portion of progressives, splintering and going to the Green Party, doing a third party vote like they did in 2016.
Am I imagining it that happens a lot more on the progressive side than it does on the right wing side?
Yeah.
Or is that just imagined?
No, I think that's pretty spot on. The right wing seems far more tribalistic in their approach to politics. They're willing to concede to one another, and they coalesce way better than the left does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Do you think that ultimately is a good thing or bad thing on their behalf?
Oh, it's a great thing, because it'll lead to them winning more elections, just because
Yeah.
they're not willing to cut each other up, and they're willing to coalesce around some common goal, and they got us beat doing that, in my opinion.
I know you're not a therapist or a sociologist, but why do you think that the progressives or the left wing are more likely to say, "No, this is it. I'm done with you, and I have to have it my way or else."
Yeah,
But we're
what is
supposed
it?
to be the open-minded ones,
Yeah, no,
I
you're
find to
right.
be
Yeah.
ironic.
What could it be? There's some psychological there's something going on there where, I don't know, if people are afraid to be wrong. It's like if we're being intellectual and being smart, we have to recognize a compromise somewhere. Okay.
Mhm.
Politics is about a lot of compromise. It's just that's the
Yeah.
nature of politics. So why isn't a section of the left falling in line when they should, and they're
Mhm.
just being rebellious and splintering off when we need to coalesce around beating Trump?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a good question. I just don't know what
Mhm.
that is. Stubborn.
Okay. Right, right. Okay, let's move along to Tulsi Gabbard. So
Okay.
let's think about some of the concerns you have with Tulsi Gabbard and some of the what you perceive to be some of her strengths.
What are some of her strengths? Let's see. Medicare for all is always at the top. It's always at the very top with her. She has a very solid domestic record when it comes to voting for progressive policies. I wish I had my computer. I wish my computer was working. I could bring them
Yeah.
up. People don't know, but my computer crashed 3 times before we got this
Mhm.
going.
Mhm. Mhm.
But but from what I know from looking over her record, it's very progressive on a
Right.
domestic level, and that suits me just fine. Um, fight for 15, Medicare for all. Um, she's for green energy. She's anti-nuclear energy. What are some other things? It
Yeah,
just
she said that she's not she didn't back the Green New Deal, Ocasio-Cortez's
Correct.
Green New Deal, but I believe
Right.
she said the way to implement it wasn't as um, I guess realistic. Is the only way.
Okay.
And there's a couple other things she had in it that she was concerned about, like it had Medicare for all attached to it, and a couple other things, federal jobs program, and she felt like that was demanding way too much, all in one go.
But she wanted to support it, and but she
Right.
also went on to say, like, she supported renewable green energy proposals.
Right.
So she's definitely on that side. But like, yeah, like you said, there's a couple things, and there's a lot of people that had a problem with Green New Deal. But uh, when the Green New Deal takes more form, and it's out of the framework phase, I can see her supporting it. If she's
Okay.
already supporting renewable energy, like, I can see her supporting the Green New Deal.
Right.
It's just in her trajectory to do so.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, she's solid on policy. But I notice a lot of people, give her a lot of grief because of her past on LGBTQ issues and controversial stances that she once had. Personally, I've forgiven her for it, but I think you're well within your, right to be suspicious, to be, say screw you. No, you voted that way, you acted that way, you said those things, and But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think she's sincere, Josh? Like when she says,
yeah, I mean, based upon her voting record, she has 100% with the HRC. She's made several attempts of apologizing. She continually posts in support of LGBTQ policies on her Facebook and different media.
right?
I just don't see how a person can go on, 7, 8 years, pretending like they're someone they're not. Whereas for me, Hillary Clinton was really obvious, it's, how she
Right.
would just speak with the political expediency winds of the time. She would change, oh, I'm not for TPP. And then next thing, oh, I'm totally against that. And, it's like within a matter
Yeah.
of 6 months, So I think she's pretty convincing. And I think it matches up with the evolution of the way the America as a whole has gone. So it makes sense, like think about where everybody was 10 years ago and how that's equivalent to, say, someone that is anti-choice donating to Tulsi Gabbard. They're really pretty much the equivalent. Should we then go after, or do you feel like they're not the equivalent? So just to give you a backdrop, I don't know how much you know about it, but apparently several years back, Modi was a governor of a particular province in India, and some incursion happened where 1,000 Muslims essentially were exterminated. And he has since been held responsible for that. And sort of leading the charge of that is the Hindu nationalist, I guess, is what the thought is, even though I think it's sort of stereotype and generalizing a whole group. Sort of like you could say white nationalists are responsible for what happened in Charlottesville.
Okay, I see
You
that.
can't
Yeah.
claim everybody that's, wanting the nation to be more white-centric or Eurocentric to be for violence,
I get it.
Make that kind of claim, that's inaccurate.
I agree.
Now, that's where that all stems from, and the fact that she's met with those groups, but they're more not like on a one-to-one, but more like they're out in the crowd. She's met with Modi, and she's taken the donations. She's open to taking donations. How would you feel, let's say, that you heard somewhere down the pike, Bernie Sanders inadvertently received donations from white nationalists? I mean, what would be your thoughts?
Oh, my instant thoughts would be disaster, because it all boils down to political optics. Like, I don't think there's anything there that says Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard or anyone we support would be promoting their ideals. So it just boils down to optics and how they should obviously reject the money because of the optics, because a lot of people aren't really willing to go deep in politics. They're not willing to understand the situation where it's like, okay, yeah, that money's diversified and, splinters here, you got a piece here, piece here, piece here. And it's just like, nope, all I heard was Bernie Sanders, white nationalist, forget that guy.
Right.
Okay. So,
and now, again, that's just coming from the Western perspective, because we can't truly say that the Hindu nationalists are equivalent to the white nationalists here. Right. We don't really know. We don't have we don't live in that culture, so we don't really know what their ultimate agenda is and why they're vying for what they're vying for. So,
true.
But anyway, so ultimately, you feel then the best thing to do, not necessarily for moral or ethical reasons, but more from optics, aesthetics, would be if she could take the time to figure out to not receive donations from that group, at least as a lump sum from that group.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's moral too. I mean, it's definitely, it's not a source that anybody we support should be getting funding from. Okay. It's just not, so on a moral level, yes, and on a political level, yes, we should definitely refuse money from those sources. It's just the right thing to do. It's the
Okay.
correct thing.
And how much does that tarnish her in your mind then, if any?
Like, let me think about that.
Tough question.
Yeah, it does, because it does tarnish.
Mhm.
It does leave a bad taste in my mouth. Like, it's like, that's just not right on any level, no matter where we size it up at. There's no justification I'm willing to hear that Tulsi Gabbard is taking money from, nationalists, white nationalists, or Hindu nationalists, or whatever. Like, I don't want any of my candidates being funded or supported by any extremist groups like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't
So,
even know the steps that any candidate can take to streamline that, and
right.
filter that out. It seems very complex, and I'm not even sure, to what
Yeah. I
degree
mean,
it's possible.
yeah. And like Tulsi, to my knowledge, she's broken off ties with
Right.
those.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was
Right. So,
invited to some type of conference, and then she was scheduled on the conference, and then at the last few minutes, she canceled. She hasn't
okay.
been in touch with him since. Now, in
Yeah.
terms of the funding part of it, the donations part of it, I don't know what the latest is on that, but I haven't heard anything change on that front.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about dark money and, like getting money out of politics altogether. Like, what do you think about getting money out of politics altogether, Josh?
Wow. Okay,
Gotta
so
be
I mean, I like the idea. I'm just trying to think of the logistics of it. Like, how do you run a campaign without
publicly
money?
funded campaigns.
Okay, so it's being sponsored through the citizens then. So, uh, hmm.
Yeah, it's something I need to flesh it out too. I need to do some more research on this one. But getting dark
Okay,
money,
okay, so right away it sounds better. Right up front, it sounds better, definitely.
sure,
Compared to what we have. So there's no question on that. I think
sure.
a couple concerns I have are, number one, if you have the majority that are, behind a certain policy, would that in some way favor them to use that public funding toward their policy, and would that somehow tilt it unfairly toward their side? I don't know if it would or wouldn't, but just a thought on that. Otherwise, I can't think of anything bad about it. It seems like it would be pretty good idea to implement.
Yeah, it just sounds like it'd be a cleaner campaign. Knowing
What
where
I
that money from.
I definitely think that getting Citizens United overturned is your
Right.
number one when it comes to corruption in politics. The second one, I believe, is changing our current voting to ranked choice voting or something similar to it or something like that,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we're not just, you know, choice A, choice B, choice
Right.
A is, you know, toxic, but choice B is less toxic.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
seems to
Totally.
be too limiting. But anyway, that's my thoughts
Yeah.
on that.
Totally. I agree.
Um, all right, so the obvious one, Bernie Sanders, his age, I guess, would be the big one.
Yeah. Age. It doesn't. I'm one of the people who just doesn't have a problem with this at all. I don't. I see him as pretty youthful for 76 years old, and pretty active, and you know I mean, when you look at Nancy Pelosi, she's older,
Mm-hmm.
she's 78. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Biden is 76, I believe, or a year younger. It's just they're senators in their mid 80s. I just don't see this as a big deal. I see this as a centrist tactic
Okay.
for a while there, just like, but then they'll go back like, oh, well, for Joe Biden, who's a year less. It's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous and disingenuous. So
How about the socialist title? Like he's, he goes around saying he's Democratic Socialist. Do you think that's going to hurt his
uh,
chances in any way?
I think so. I think there's just a certain amount of people he just won't be able to reach because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's too stigmatized. The word socialism, even though it's democratic socialism, it's too stigmatized. And I did a video about, he should be rebranding himself as a social democrat.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
think it's a bit
probably
too late for
slightly
that.
it's definitely too late. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's just like a certain group of people he's not gonna. I think those people are the people he's not gonna reach anyways. So
Mm.
I guess the people who are willing to reach honestly know what democratic socialism is. They know it's not socialism. So I just think the people that are going to be most offended or taken aback by it really weren't going to vote for him anyways.
So what are your thoughts on the differences between Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, and what might be the reasons you vote for one versus the other?
Hmm. Well, that is a very interesting question, Josh. Because I mean, they're very similar. They're very similar on policy. Um, there's just not many degrees of separation from these two people, which makes me speculate they'd be an awesome ticket.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I
yeah,
agree with that.
and either way you shaped it up, but I mean, like, yeah, I can't really find too many degrees of separation. I'm sure there are, but nothing leaps out at me. Does anything leap out for you? Like, big
Hmm.
difference?
No, I think that Tulsi Gabbard is definitely a plus for Bernie Sanders if he elects her, selects her as his running mate, because she is much better at bringing forth the whole regime change wars discussion, changing the tone of how we see war and our place in the world, um, shifting the dialogue around that. I think she's much better at that than Sanders is. Um,
Okay. Yeah, I
I
agree.
think Sanders is better at. I wouldn't say he's better at, but I think that he has a longer track record that she doesn't have. Now she does have a track record. I mean, it's
Right.
it's it's substantial. There's no questions
Sure.
about that. Uh, but in terms of proving and being consistent, being reliable, since the inception to now, Bernie Sanders has got that hands down. He is who he
Oh,
was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. That's Bernie Sanders then is Bernie Sanders today. Whereas with Telsey, who Telsey was 10 years ago is not who Telsey is today. So we have to just
right.
be honest about that. It's just a fact.
Very
Doesn't
much so.
necessarily
Yeah.
mean it's a good or bad thing. It just means that's just a fact. And for some people, that might not settle well. Um,
I
but
agree.
with Sanders, I just don't see any reason why, if he gets elected, he's going to say, well, I kind of like fooled you guys. Aha, too bad for you. I think
Right. Yeah.
he's going to be fighting tooth and nail to push through what he said he's been fighting for his entire life. So,
Totally. And I've been watching the campaigns he's been doing, and it's almost like it's like verbatim from the last one. He just says what he's so consistent, like and that's why he's very trustworthy. To be the lead candidate is
mhm,
because we know he's going to implement these things, whether
right.
it's Medicare for all, whether it's Fight for 15 or Green New Deal. Uh, just listen to him speak. Every campaign stop, every speech, every rally is the same thing
Yeah.
verbatim almost.
And it's
And
always
it's just
exciting. It's always exciting. How many times you hear it too, isn't it?
that's isn't that great? Isn't that so great? It's so refreshing to actually just you never get sick of it. I never get sick of the tape playing.
So, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, appreciate the words and thanks for having me on.
No problem.